Okay, here's another category or another higher brain anchoring tool or higher brain activation tool. And it's kind of a paradoxical one. A lot of these are paradoxical when you really think about it. It's, you know, this one and the previous couple higher brain tools are really the paradoxical notion that by accepting your lower brain and even wanting it to get activated, you actually are creating weights for your higher brain to lift weights and build its muscle. So there's one of the great paradoxes of life is that by accepting and embracing and diving into your lower brain, you can then truly develop separation from and relationship to and command over your lower brain. And so this is in that same vein is that you're identifying which category of trigger is activating your lower brain can be quite effective at cooling down the lower brain and building the higher brain. And so we're continuing along the lines of left prefrontal cortex here. And in fact, we're going to be, in some sense, expanding the aspect of the left brain that we're utilizing to do this brain tool. And that's identifying the trigger categories. And that's, again, combination of the orbital prefrontal cortex, which is storytelling, and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which seems to be more associated with kind of an intellectual awareness that your lower brain has activated. Okay. So the concept is that by identifying which trigger category is activating your lower brain is very useful. And it's fascinating that by virtue of analyzing the category, this actually pulls you out of your lower brain many times, most often. Now, it's a really a weakness of ours, an Achilles heel. It's a trigger that really gets us bad. It may be that we get pulled out, out of the lower brain, then we go right back into the lower brain, and there's a wrestling match that happens because it's such a vulnerability for us. But 9 times out of 10, boom, you're out of there because there's a famous saying in neuroscience that if you name it, you tame it, right? So just by identifying that I am lower brain and what's the category of trigger that activated my lower brain, and later on we'll talk about what's the story that my lower brain may be telling about this situation. All this detective work and all this labeling and all this naming causes a lot of taming. And so, as I say here, every time you do this, you build a higher brain neural network that makes this easier and easier to do. So, to make it more visual, see, here's orbital prefrontal cortex, that's the storytelling machinery. Medial prefrontal cortex is when you feel that your lower brain is activated. And dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is more of an intellectual kind of pattern recognition that your lower brain is activated. And that's more what we're focused on, OPFC and DLPFC in this brain tool, which is identifying the trigger that activated your lower brain. Every single time you do this, you can see the neural network expanding in these parts of the brain. You're building it so that it makes it easier and easier to do it quickly, efficiently, sometimes even automatically, and then that separates you from the lower brain, cools it down. And so here are the categories. So I break it down into, and these are, as I say here, these are the barbells. And later on, we'll talk about kind of the four-step process of re-regulating your lower brain, but we're kind of putting in the building blocks. But these are the weights, if you will. These are the triggers that activate your lower brain, but then you use it to build your higher brain to separate from it and develop a relationship with and then eventually command over the lower brain. And so these are all difficult conversations or uncomfortable scenarios. And I've kind of broken life into 10 of them, basically. And so let's say, someone, just broadly speaking, you got lower brain triggered by a situation or a person or a thought. It's usually one of those three things. It's a person, situation, or thought. You got triggered and you went lower brain. Or it could be that someone else is lower brain, and then that's causing you to go lower brain. Or it's you cause somebody else to go lower brain, which then caused you to go lower brain. You see? So these are categories where, just broadly speaking, lower brain gets activated uh, by life in some way or someone adjacent to us. And then there's creative discomfort, which is you offer an idea, but it's rejected. And so you have a little bit of a feeling of being put down or criticized or diminished, or someone else offers an idea, but then we have to reject it. And that's kind of scary because then we have to deal with the prospect of them being angry with us. And that's a big no-no for the lower brain because of that's even a bigger threat to status, right? The driving force of the lower brain is avoiding the loss of status. That's the whole self-esteem idea and FOMO. Uh, it may be that you have to accept an idea from another person. So, in a way, they are superior and therefore you become inferior because they came up with the idea and they look better now than you do. So, subconsciously or consciously, the lower brain is activated and saying, we don't like that because we lost status. Even worse, so as you go further and further down, these become more and more powerful at activating the lower brain for most people. Now, for all of us, we have, there may be three or four that are really zingers for us, but having to acknowledge publicly that another person's idea was better or that they helped you can be very triggering of our lower brain. So this is in the arena of creative or intellectual knowledge, anything having to do with ideas and insight and knowledge and understanding. Then we jump into the category that's even more threatening, which is performance discomfort or difficult conversations having to do with accountability for how well we're doing our job. So, are we measuring how we're doing our job? And that can then really be a kind of truth teller that's very uncomfortable because it may expose a limitation in our understanding or a limitation in our skills that need to be worked on. But again, we're going to learn to embrace feedback, right? Or you have to provide feedback to another person. Again, the fear of someone being angry at us is very, especially when it comes to challenging somebody's performance. That's very risky business as far as the lower brain is concerned, and it's risky in period. And so we need to develop better and better skill at delivering feedback in a very sophisticated way or asking for feedback. And the scariest is when feedback just comes at us when we were not asking for it, can be very lower brain activating because we're just not ready for it. And it may just hit a part of our lower brain that's really vulnerable, a wounded part of us that gets triggered. And then it goes wham, and the lower brain really gets activated. So these are examples. These are the major categories as far as I'm concerned when it comes to the emotional category. Of course, there's physical discomfort that you can bring into this, but these are the categories of kind of threat or triggering that happen. And by being able to kind of break it down when you get lower brain activated and saying, I wonder which category of trigger it was that activated my lower brain. Boom, you fool yourself out of the lower brain. And so uh, we're going to really kind of, in a sense, flip the script on the lower brain because we're going to look forward to lower brain activation, just like the self-esteem and FOMO brain tool that we talked about. We're going to actually embrace diminishment and loss because it's going to give us a deeper understanding of how our lower brain is working so we can have more and more free will, more and more command and control over what this brain is doing moment to moment. So we're causing it to give us maximum happiness rather than being obsessed with tribal acceptance and rank and FOMO for its purpose of genes. And so we look forward to lower brain activation because we're going to play the game of identifying the trigger. And then notice number two, notice how the lower brain cools when you label the trigger, right? You name it, you tame it. It's the higher brain that's doing the detective work and the naming. And by naming it, we're sort of separating from the lower brain, and then the blood's going up here, and then the lower brain, by definition, starts to cool down because it's not getting as much blood. And then even better down the line, we're going to say, okay, you know what? When someone puts my idea down, that's a real vulnerability for me. I get really kind of steamed up, or my chest hurts, or my head wants to blow up, or however our lower brain reacts to it. Like, wow, okay, that's a real vulnerability for us. We need to have a response plan neural network the next time. For example, if someone puts my idea down, it may be very threatening, lower brain activating, but in the future, I may create a new neural network that says, huh, you know what? I just love to learn. I just love to expand my knowledge, expand my understanding, expand my skills. It's just so fun to just get better. And so if someone comes up with an idea that's better than mine. I'm like, that's really cool. It's like making a discovery in the forest. I discovered like this treasure in the middle of the forest rather than telling a story of, oh, I'm, lesser than, or I'm not smart enough, or they're smarter than I am. We're like, instead, it's like, oh, that's really cool. I just found another piece of the puzzle up here. And that's pretty cool. That's an example of a new neural network response pattern that you'll program in here so the next time that trigger comes in where they criticize our idea, we divert into, this is cool. I may have a discovery coming my way. And that's a very powerful way and you can do this from moment to moment to moment to moment. And life is constantly giving you opportunities to activate your lower brain. And now we turn lemons into lemonade by building the higher brain networks that name and tame and assign categories to triggers. And this becomes a more and more, we become more and more anchored in the higher brain rather than the trigger taking us downward. All right. Excellent. We will see you in the next video, hopefully. All right. Thanks.